allowed to, because I don't think anybody could stand 8 hours of my nonsense.
And us rambling for 8 hours straight. That would be horrible.
So all of you enjoy the fact that I'm going to not use certain words and phrases for the next few minutes, at least until it's demo time.
So wait, does that totally mean that Dolly can be cheeky and like completely a brat?
Dolly will be answering for it afterwards.
Nah, shit, never mind. Anyway.
So the purpose of this one is going to be, as I keep saying a million times over, just for review, is safety, what to look for, warning signs, building suggestions around safety, just kind of a general go ahead of that. Our very, very first lesson ended up being 2.5 hours going over the basic stuff, and we're going to try not to go that long. And I'm going to try to get the glare out of my face because I don't have a very professional setup here. So nobody wants to stare at me.
You're going to have old man glasses.
You know what? Fine. I'm just going to take these off because I don't really need to see a whole lot in the meantime.
Totally okay with
right there. Okay. So I can kind of see everybody. That's all that really matters. So we're going to go over basic safety stuff. Everybody here has some amount of experience, either as a hypnotist, as a subject, or both. Especially safety and things like this come to what we do on the kinkier side of things, because there's that really fine line between what we do and BDSM and dom-sub dynamics, things like that. So it's really important that we make sure we cover all that stuff. And for me, one of the reasons I want to do this is so that those resources are available. We're not the end-all, be-all of information. There's tons of information out there, and I definitely encourage everybody to look up as much as they can, especially if you're wanting to dive into this stuff. But hopefully we can cover all the basic stuff so that there's at least a mildly entertaining place to go to look through it all.
Mildly entertaining.
Mildly entertaining.
That is certainly a good way of putting it.
I can't do the no glasses thing, so I'm just going to have to keep my head down. I'll do that.
The glare is not that bad. You are fine, dear.
Mm-hmm. So, as soon as rummaging through her room. So the basic thing and the first thing to go through is something that's really, really important, and it's especially good for younger and newer subjects and people wanting to explore all this stuff to do, is how to make sure you don't end up
fucked over.
Exactly. One of the important things to do is always make sure you look into what you're doing and talk. One of the things that I get so frequently, and I am willing to bet that Thunder has probably seen it and Benedict has probably seen it, is that message of, hey, can you hypnotize me? What did you want for your session? Oh, you can do anything you want.
That's red flag warning signs right there.
That is somebody who's going to get themselves hurt, or it's okay, and it is strongly encouraged. Know your own limits. Know what you want, and it's okay to ask for what you want. You always want to make sure, especially if it's an established person. Say you found somebody through Tumblr or through whatever method that you found somebody. Look at some of the stuff they've done as well. Don't just
do your research. Basically, it's like buying a car. It's like looking for a house. It's like looking for a doctor. You need to do your research, and people don't do that. Mm-hmm. And it's not a taking off my makeup. It's not a good thing. Sorry, didn't mean to jump in, but from the sub side of thing, like, do your goddamn research. The thing you're basically allowing someone to mess with your head. Sorry. You're basically allowing someone into your head, allowing someone, into... Exactly. Thank you, Lily. Be cautious,
Now, that's not to say there are plenty of people, especially as a message to those of us learning, people that are just getting started out there, is be cautious, be aware of what you're doing. I will say for any of the rest of us on call, please feel free to hop in at any time. And I believe I have the questions thing turned on, so if anybody asks questions or has comments, we can access that phone side as well.
Yeah, if you're watching this live, feel free to ask us questions. I know I'm keeping an eye on it. A couple of us are as well, so feel free to ask questions and we'll address it when we can.
Or anybody who watches this posts things. Right now we have one whole viewer, which Doctor wouldn't mind throwing that link up real quick again.
But even then, like, if there's questions
Where would you like
after
me to
the
put
video, in the pub, probably.
Yeah, any of the groups are fine.
Won't take long.
So, yeah, do your research. Look into, make sure that it's somebody who is going to be going in the same direction you want. There are as many hypnotists out there as styles of people as there are different types of grass or fruit, or there's so many different styles. And everybody has art. There we go. It's an art. It's as simple as that. Every artist has a different way that they go about it. And so not only do you want to find somebody whose style is going to work with you, you want to find somebody whose specialty or the things that they do mesh with you. You don't want to just message some random person out there. For example, there are some of the really well-established hypnodoms out there, men and women. You're not going to just throw to them and hope that they take it easy. They're going to have their specific things that they do and things like that.
Well, it's like, if I can interrupt, actually this happened the other day, and haven't even talked to you about this. There was the person that messaged Dolly when she was in the pub, and had asked if it was okay for them to hypnotize her, and Dolly was like, super cautious about it because, one, Dolly doesn't work with anyone else. She has the one person she works with, which is you, and then that's it, because too many people screwing with the head is not a good thing either. Dolly's been saying this for a while, don't jump from person to person to person trying to get someone to hypnotize you, because that's just asking for trouble. But anyway, not the point. Point was, they had messaged, and the next thing out of their face was, well, what's your triggers? And I was like, well, one, she's not working with you, and two, there's too many to go into right now. And the person was like, well, just give me your obedience one. And I was like, again, don't work with people,
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that was the thing that happened the other day.
So yeah, with safety, one of the best things you can do as a new subject going to it is look at not only the people that are available to talk with, but what you yourself are looking for. I've worked with people who simply like to relax with it, all the way up to some of the things that Lily and I will do, or Shelby and I will do, and then the things that I do with Dolly. So different levels of that kind of thing. For example, I have somebody that I've worked with sporadically over a few months who all they really want is relaxing. They don't want triggers, they don't want suggestions, and it's totally fine if that's what it is for you. Everybody has something that
they want out of it.
And you should never, ever, ever feel ashamed or like you can't be upfront about what it is you're looking for something. So
if that happens, you need to run.
As a subject, especially one, always be upfront about what it is that you're there for, what you want, what you're looking for, that kind of thing.
I'm actually totally okay with people asking what triggers are, but like asking for the specific trigger word is way different, because I've had a lot of people ask me what kind of triggers I do for people, because they're just kind of looking for ideas and stuff to work off of, like stuff to start off with.
Exactly. But like that person was specifically asking
a step farther,
Yeah.
Breeze had a couple people like that recently, where they just want to know her trigger and try and trigger her instantly, which
exactly.
They're going beyond the point of curiosity into the realms of creep.
Yeah.
So, and that is definitely something. Warning signs, certain things to look out for. Whether you're new at it, whether you're new at it or you're an experienced subject, anybody who starts out by asking what your triggers are, that's somebody that you need to just
run,
move, just ignore them. for multiple reasons. One, you should, my personal feelings is, you should, as a hypnotist, have your own set of triggers. If you want to work with somebody, that's a trust and an exchange that you need to earn. You can't just say, "Oh, hey, you have a trance trigger, cool. Let's put you out, and I'm going to do my own thing." Anybody can do that.
That's the lazy man way of doing things.
You don't have to be a hypnotist to use triggers that are already installed.
That's the Omegle way to do it.
What now?
That's how they do it on Omega most of the times. They join it on like things and like, these are my triggers. Here, go nuts.
Oh god, that fucking thing.
Now, if you are a subject who has that kind of thing, that's fine. We can go into the specifics of being safe with triggers and things like that. Like Dolly was saying, one thing that I recommend for a lot of new people is try to stick with one person. Once you get an idea of how trance works for you, as long as you know what you're doing and you look into it and you take the time to become familiar with it for yourself, it is perfectly safe to work with multiple people, but know what you're doing with that. I know when Shelby and I met, she was in a thing where she was kind of, working with other people and kind of seeing what people do. And as long as you're familiar with where you go with it and you know you're safe, that's something that's fine to do. But don't just jump into Omega or a kick group or go on Tumblr and shoot out a message and schedule sessions with a dozen different hypnotists.
And we've had people do that in the pub recently too.
Not just the pub, they do it everywhere. It's just kind of a trait for people that want to jump in way faster than they should.
Also,
just
on
less
that note,
common.
Shelby's trying to comment, guys.
Sorry, also on that note, I know there's Sleepy Chat where they kind of allow you to jump into a conversation one-on-one with somebody who you don't know. Always be kind of careful with that because you don't know who's on the other side of that. You don't know if it's somebody you can really trust. So always be careful
if they have bad intentions or not. Yeah.
Sleepy Chat's a little bit better moderated than Omegle, in that it actually has some form of moderation
they're people that run their admins are actually pretty good. It doesn't excuse, jumping into something and not being prepared, but at least with Sleepy Chat, if something does happen, you have an actual person that runs it.
And another reason why I recommend people stick to one person at the beginning is you never know, especially early on, how you're going to react and take to triggers. I've had people that I've worked with who, no matter how much I reinforce and push in that a trigger is to remain closed, that they will still respond to it, and sometimes even trigger themselves. And so it's something you need to learn, is how your brain takes to suggestions and triggers and how you respond in trance. How, when you're doing a role play or a personality play suggestion, how deep do you go into it? When you're doing sensations, or even, for example, Dolly has a couple of triggers that we've reinforced to the point where we have to be careful that she's not driving.
Found that out today.
Which a lot of that comes with because we've worked so closely for a longer period of time. Of course, those are going to be stronger as part of that rapport and part of that bond. But I've had people who, right out the gate, as their very, very first session, just gone. And it happens. Some people need a lot of building into it. Some people go right away. So that's another reason why you want to stick, because nobody wants to find out that you've bounced around to 5, 6, 7 different hypnotists and say you have a trigger of a word. You don't want that word to have 6 different triggers associated with it.
Well, also, it kind of looks a little funky. Like, okay, example. Tolly was working with you, Jason, and then all of a sudden messages, Benny and wants to work with him, and messages Thunder and wants to work with him, or messages Lily and wants to work with her, and then you find out about it, and it wasn't discussed. It's like a relationship. It's like dating. If you just come out and start hopping around from person to person, how does that look on the person that you first chose, or any of the people that you chose? Like, oh, I wasn't, it kind of is like, I wanted to explore other options, but we didn't discuss that. It's like a relationship. It's like dating somebody. It looks a little funny.
So yeah, and that's another thing that, again, with communication, with honesty, is if that's what you want to do, whether recommended or not, be upfront. Message somebody, hey, I'm learning. I want to see how different people feel. Would you mind showing me? Be upfront. Never, ever, ever be afraid to be honest about what's going on, because it's your head. This is your freaking head that we're playing with. And you need to be as clear and concise and have as much communication as you possibly can with that. If you're a new subject and you know, hey, I take really strong sensation triggers, be upfront about that. Because what happens if the hypnotist you're working with is very, very, very particular in how they word sensations? You make somebody who's giving you a very specific suggestion, and you already take those strong, you could very well end up in a very uncomfortable situation. Whereas most hypnotists, if they're working with somebody who says, hey, I'm a new subject, I've never done this before, or I've only done it a couple times, and I'm still learning, most of us, I would hope, are going to take a little bit slow and ease into it.
The valid ones will.
So little things like that. Be aware of what you want from the session. Don't be afraid to communicate and explain exactly what's going on. I don't know. He disappeared. He wandered off. They'll be back. You three are way too pretty for him to not come back to.
Okay, only see two pretty people, so there's that.
Shush. Anyway. In addition to the safeties, one of the other things, and again, it depends on the subject and what you want to work with, is for a lot of people, you're going to want to work in safety suggestions, and you want to be aware of where you go with things. I know, for example, I'm going to use Lily, if you don't mind me using as an example. I know, working with you, I don't have to ever specify, hey, this only works with me. Because I know you have a very strong grip on yourself, and I know that I don't ever have to worry about somebody finding out, oh, she has this trigger, and using that trigger. For example, do you mind if I use, real quick, as a demo, nothing super intense? Okay, so we have one trigger that we use, come to me, kitten. Thank you, sweetie. Up, up, up. Now, I know, I've said this, however many people watch this, I know, without having to specify to her, if anybody else says that to you, there's going to be no reaction whatsoever. That is because that's how your head works. Other people, maybe not so much. I know Shelby is a more experienced subject, and I know you have a very, very good grip on your head, so you're only going to go into a trance if you want to. But at the same time, I like to make sure sometimes that we specify extra little details of it. So, little things here and there.
Ow!
So, I'm sure Benny will hop back on and sometime he just dropped off. One of my examples, and I'm sure a lot of us have had this happen, is somebody that I've worked with at one point that I didn't realize, because there had not been communication there, was incredibly susceptible to the point where somebody that they knew found out about it, and because we hadn't talked any of that, because I had never had any indications, this is back when I started, somebody had found out and started. So I mean, that's ages ago, and nothing ever really bad came of it, but it's one of those terrifying moments, especially as you're learning and going right at the beginning, is holy crap, this could have ended so much worse.
I mean, you were technically responsible for it if something had happened as well.
So it's one of those things is making sure that you, again, going into communicating, making sure you know where your head goes with things. As far as hypnotists, there's a variety of different suggestions depending on the subject you're working with that you can use for that. A lot of times, just a simple "when I or only I." Really cliche statement, but it's very effective. It's a reinforcement. It's very clear. It's concise. And it's when I or only I say this or do this. Very simple to work into your suggestions. And for most people, that's going to drive home, oh, even though their conscious mind may be floating out near Pluto, the back of their head, they're still going to identify that, and they're going to recognize it. They're not going to know what's going on. Sometimes you might need... Oh, did you have something to add, Shelby?
And it is a cliche because it does work. If it didn't work, it wouldn't have become a cliche.
Exactly.
It's like the deeper go you, the better you feel deeper you go. It's one of those things that you hear often enough. It's like, oh, yeah, that is kind of a universal truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things as you relax, it starts to feel good. The better it feels, the easier it is to relax because you want to feel better. And then you relax more because you're feeling good and you feel really good, so you just want to relax more. So.
No, my fault, sorry.
So little things like that, and you can always add, there's so many different things. You do one of my very favorites for somebody who I just sort of casually met, is they had worked really intensely with somebody to the point where when they hit a certain depth of trance, they basically automatically would lock themselves down. So one of those, hey, this is the deepest I can go unless we know each other. So for certain people, that can work as well. And I've put in with somebody who I knew was going to bounce around to different people, is working in suggestions. And again, how you phrase this is going to be something that you'll kind of work with. But the gist of it was, whenever somebody is suggesting to put in a trigger, no matter how deep they are, how out of their head they are, they're going to identify that it's there, and they still have to get permission in that trance. So little things to help work in that they can accept or reject a suggestion.
Just as an aside, Benedict disconnected and can't get back in, so he says good night to all.
Well, that's too bad.
Once you leave, remember, you can't get back into the call.
Yeah, I told him that.
Yeah, once it starts. So that is too bad. But hi, Benedict. So, little things. I know, Thunder, you have one person that you worked with mostly. And so I imagine you're probably pretty familiar with having to work in safeties and things like that, because you said that person was particularly responsive.
Yes.
As far as the subject goes. Did you have any particular experience or anything you would throw out as far as establishing safeties and boundaries and things like that to help with them?
Nothing terribly specific. Mostly I just use the only me kind of thing.
So, or Shelby, I know you've worked with a lot of people. Do you have anything particular that you would say particularly helps, that's worked well for you? Or?
Nothing that you haven't already said, at least.
So little things like that. I myself don't do a whole lot of triggers. I think I have, and with people that I work with closely, I usually just use the same couple of triggers. My trance trigger is usually the same. Any objections? So simple. So, for example, I use almost the exact same trigger every single time. Drop. Up, up, up. One, you get fun things where you get that simultaneous switch, which is kind of entertaining. Also easy to remember. You don't ever want to, as far as safety goes, you don't ever want to come up with absurdly complex triggers. And if you're going to be working with multiple people as a hypnotist, you don't want like a list of phrases, like every person having 10 different phrases. You're never going to remember that, even if you make a freaking spreadsheet. So little things like that. But as far as triggers go, I myself don't use any. I have that, and I think I have 2 or 3 others that I use with each of you.
That depends if you're counting one of them as just one instead of a infinite number line.
That one also has.
He's specifically talking the number game, yeah.
I know. So that one lends itself into suggestions as well. The big thing with post-hypnotic suggestions, whether they're triggered or not, is establishing very, very specific set for that. And I know Harley does a great job with that, so I kind of wish she was here because she's always good with that. But as far as suggestions go, you always, when you're putting a suggestion into somebody, want to make sure that you establish when that post-hypnotic suggestion's effects end. Whether it's a time, whether it's condition-based, whether it's a triggered end to it.
And I know, Jay, the artist I was working with before you always kind of put in that extra suggestion of, like, if anything should happen while we're, like, talking, and this will fade, or, like, that kind of stuff. A lot of conditional stuff. Mm-hmm. But sometimes there was a little bit too much conditional, so it was just kind of making it super simple because you are in that kind of tranced out space that too much information can just get a little bit overwhelming.
Exactly. You don't want to overload unless it's an overload induction, which is a completely different thing from a suggestion. So a lot of times, and again, this is also something that can really, really benefit if you're working with one person regularly, is you eventually get used to
their style,
their phrasing, their style. For example, all three of you, when I say up, 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 you will come up very quickly. You don't have to do a count up, anything like that, because it's your head, you know, okay, it's time to be awake.
And it's
sometimes
funny
if it's a...
We had never gone over that either, and just realized that, like, we had never gone over that was a thing. It was just because we've worked together for so long. Mm-hmm. You know?
Whereas at the very beginning, all three of you, when I worked with you at the very beginning, we would do a count up every single time. It would be that count to bring you up. But once you get familiar, Shelby, we did count ups a couple of times, you just don't remember.
Shelby gets too fucked to remember things.
That too.
Hey, Shelby. Shelby, do you remember the fire alarm the other night? Yeah, Dolly was on the phone with him when he woke up from that.
So, I'll throw this up. We had a question that came in. It's not really a question, but Benedict dropped, and I'll say this so Benedict, in the event that you're watching or anything like that pops up, for whatever reason, when you disconnect from a live broadcast on Google Hangouts, you can't get back into the active call part. I'm not sure why.
Stupid.
Well, because it would be havoc if you could.
Unless I can. Let's try this.
So Lily, quick recap. It was the other night, and Dolly had woken up really super late and had called Jay, and we were kind of talking. No, Shelby, it's gonna get told, so deal with it. So, you know, we were talking, and of course, we were talking or whatever, and you know, he gets a text from Shelby, and he had just put her to bed, and apparently the fire alarm had gone off in the middle of the night, and so he asked, you know, do you mind if I put Shelby to bed? And I was like, it's fine, you know, whatever. So he took off his headset and had called Shelby on the phone and, you know, put her to sleep. Just, you know, the normal sleep countdown that he does with her. Apparently Shelby was too fucked up that night that she didn't even remember waking up and having the fire alarm, nor did she remember Jay putting her to sleep.
I don't think I told Jay this or any of you guys, but we apparently also had to evacuate.
Did you evacuate?
She doesn't know, remember?
So that's in between trances, things like that. Not everybody has such strong post-hypnotic amnesia. Sometimes some people honestly, a lot of times that has to be conditioned in. Some people do it on their own. I know that you've started to experience a little bit of it from time to time.
And I know for me, it wasn't something that I started out with. That probably didn't happen until 4 or 5 years into doing it, that I really started getting post-hypnotic amnesia.
And you'll sometimes have people that just flat out do not recall. So it all depends on the person.
Shelby, Dolly loves you.
Right. Live, ladies. Nice.
Come on now, behave. Oh, goodness.
Sunday, you haven't hung around us long enough, dear.
So little things like that phrasing for safety is the suggestion will last for 5 minutes after, or the suggestion will last until you see this word, or until this effect passes. Things like that. You always want to specify it's going to start at this point and it will end. I typically don't like doing really, really long-term suggestions. One, because once the session ends, unless you are in person, you don't really get to enjoy the rest of the effects on them.
Also, the way that you work is kind of weird. Just saying.
I'm not sure how to take that, but
no, just okay. And it's probably because of the way that we do things, and like you have people that you work with, but then you have the family. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those like, I don't know. Brain is like, you don't use long-term triggers because of that reason. Mm-hmm. As well, like you don't typically work with people over and over. Like you don't build like the same relationship with most of your subjects and people that you work with that you do with the family.
Right. But even then, certain things like a conditional trigger where you feel an effect upon a trigger word, those are one and done things, and those tend, without reinforcement, those will typically fade over a couple days, a week at most, depending on what kind of subject you are. Mm-hmm. So those aren't as big a deal.
Actively used, yeah.
Right. But I mean, if you're doing something really simple, say the entire purpose of the session is to turn somebody into a cat. Mm-hmm. At the very end, a lot of times, if it's one of those, like I have that silly little recording that I have on SoundCloud, which specifies at the end of the file, hey, you're going to feel these effects for 5 minutes or so afterwards. So even if it's something like that, mm-hmm. not only do I do that, one, as a hypnotist, you don't, again, get to enjoy the long-term effects, and two, you never really want to leave somebody spaced out and unsupervised if you can avoid it.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
Dangerous for a variety of reasons. One, you never know what's going to happen to them after you leave. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of reasons why it's a terrible idea to just drop somebody and run.
Like, if that fire alarm had happened and it was a real fire, and I was still spaced out, just assuming that you hadn't put me to bed like we usually do and kind of put in those safeties, if there was an actual emergency like that, you could be potentially putting somebody in really bad danger.
Yeah. And again, it's one of those, you would be responsible if something happened.
Or even something as simple as, say you're having an erotic session, and say it's somebody who, super, super common fetish, has a bimbification fetish. You don't want to drop somebody into that completely airheaded space and say, okay, bye. You don't know how long it's going to take them to come out of it on their own. You don't
or
know
if
the
they
kinds
will.
of things that they're going to... Exactly. Everybody will inevitably at some point. But there's a lot that can happen without that supervision, and that's super, super, super important, unless it's somebody that you really know. I know, for example, going back to Shelby, I know that anything I put in, when we work, I know where she is. I know, say if it's something you're in your room at the end of the night, I'm not going to worry about putting in an end, because I know you're going to end your night in your room. You're in a safe spot, and I know if somebody comes in or if something happens, you're going to be able to snap it because you've been at this for quite a while. Whereas somebody new, I'm going to wake them up completely before we go, or say we've had those quick pep talks before a class or before a test. I'm only going to do certain things because I know your environment and I know what it's okay to do. I'm not going to run you out and yeah. Apologies, I lost part of my train of thought there. Rambling.
Well, that was our job.
Babbling is Allie's job.
Oh man, Allie.
Then we have... Yeah, old man said thanks, sweetie. So, also be aware of where your subject is when you're working on stuff. somebody, whether they're at home, the kind of environment that they're in, especially
like before, with Dolly's situation and where she was before. Like there were certain things that we couldn't do because of the situation and the environment that she was in. You know, couldn't do certain things, leave certain things going because of certain people that would get really upset. But yeah, that was just the example that she wanted to throw out there.
Now, however,
it's a completely different story.
And also on that note, I know a lot of subjects, myself included, live with other people. Right now I'm in a place where it's completely okay to do that kind of stuff, but when I'm at home, my parents aren't okay with it at all. So just kind of being aware of like, okay, it is possible for this to happen.
Situation, yeah.
Yeah, taking that into consideration.
A lot of us, especially the online community with it, aren't necessarily comfortable doing audio and or video either, especially early on. So especially if you're working something text or something that you don't have that visual contact, you need to extra sure that you know where they are, you know that they're safe, and you make sure that you phrase your suggestions accordingly. The number one thing you need to do is make sure that the people you're working with, the subjects you're working with, feel safe, feel warm, feel comfortable, that they're in a good place. Because all it's going to take is one bad session, and that can completely ruin hypnosis for them. Which sucks, because it's an amazing and wonderful thing. I've joked forever that everybody is a hypnotherapist, they just don't know it yet. Because it can accomplish so many things, and it's so fun to play around with.
And yeah, as a tist, it is kind of your responsibility to kind of keep your subject in line and keep them safe also, because they're kind of relying on you when they're in that headspace. Well, they aren't kind of, they are completely. They're in your hands. So you got to take that with a grain of salt, and also with great power comes great responsibility. Like, you have to be super responsible with that kind of stuff.
Spider-Man.
Especially as it regards to, or as it comes to the erotic side, the stuff that we tend to do. There's a very, very fine line between, like I said at the beginning, just having erotic sensations or the things that we do, and that dom sub, that BDSM line. One thing that a lot of people forget is just because somebody's a subject, it does not mean that they are submissive towards you. So many people forget that.
You need to establish the line first.
There may be an erotic session that has absolutely zero dom sub or BDSM connotation to it at all. It may simply be, hey, I'd like some erotic suggestions, and I'd like to have a release. One and done. You don't need to worry about the extra little things, titles, any of that stuff. But it is very, very easy to get a dominant power trip, especially early on. I guarantee every single one of us on the call has had, if you have dominant tendencies, has had that dominant power trip at some point, where you get so caught up in it you forget, oh crap, I'm supposed to be responsible for this person. Especially as a hypnotist with the sensations, because we're guiding our subjects, it's very easy to, especially young and in that heat of the moment, is losing sight of where you're going.
Oh, Puppy's dead. Sorry, just having a freaking Lydia's done with what she was doing and is super excited about it.
So we'll talk with her about it. I like our little side text conversation that's going on, but I don't think anybody is going to be able to see on the Hands call. So one of the things that you need to remember as a hypnotist is, just because somebody is allowing you to guide them into a trance, into whatever your session happens to contain, it does not mean that they're submissive towards you, and it doesn't mean that you have any extra pull. One thing that I established with pretty much everybody I work with and have worked with over the years is, at the end of the day, the person really in control is the subject. we are only going to be able to get you as deep as you let us.
Shelby, get the
We're only
sparkles.
going to be able.
Glitter!
And everything has gotten derailed.
Yes, well, it's bound to happen every now and then, yeah.
You knew this. It's your family.
Focus. Thank you.
Problem solved.
Mm-hmm. So.
Puppy is distracting.
Mm-hmm. How about we flip the phones over and we focus on the educational aspect of what we're here to do.
Computer can't flip the phone over. Unless you would like me to log out of GroupMe.
Let's remain as professional as we can, considering folks are going to be watching this.
Fine.
So keeping that line in mind is also another thing you need to make sure that you do on both sides of it. You should never, ever, ever feel like you can't express that you're not comfortable with something. Also, as a hypnotist, it's okay to tell a subject, I don't think that I'm going to be able to work within what you're looking for. Because I've worked with some very dominant subjects over the years. I myself am not a submissive person, but I've seen, you get all sorts of variety of people. Are we all focused? We all good? All right. So one of the other things that I wanted to go over with this one is building rapport and is in communicating, meeting, and building things up. I don't know if we're going to have enough time to do that without this running way over what it already has. So I am definitely going to throw out there, please feel free to throw out any kind of additional safety suggestions or tips or tidbits you'd like to make sure people keep in mind.
I think we've covered pretty much all of it. It's really just a matter of figuring out where the buttons and the limits and the lines are, and definitely communication is number one thing, communication all day long.
Yeah, be aware of who you're working with on both sides. Communicate your expectations and your limits very, very clearly. Be prepared for sometimes a slow learning experience. You may, as a newer subject, have to work with somebody 4, 5, 6 times before you really start to feel the effects. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean that they're doing anything wrong. It just means that's how your head works. You gotta find a way around it. Totally okay. So be very clear in your expectations, your limitations, what you're looking for. Definitely do your research. Don't just
jump into things.
Don't just send a message to Joe Hypnotist and say, "Hey, I want to be your slave." Any hypnotist, any person worth their salt receiving that message is going to be inclined to either completely disregard that message outright or send you some sort of refusal message.
And if they're not worth their salt and they send you some kind of stupid, generic, trance file, run the frack away.
So that is another red flag to work for. Regardless of the kind of subject you are, and again, especially newer ones, as this is what I'm trying to gear this towards, you need to make sure that the person, for lack of a better phrasing, works for it. Somebody who says, listen to this file and then message me.
Or the text.
Asks for your triggers.
The text post. Remember what Dolly got in Tumblr? Do you remember that?
Yeah, the copy-paste text inductions. If they're not willing to work for it with you, then they don't deserve your time.
And it's also okay for you as a subject to decline somebody's offer to trance. You owe nothing to them if they're like, oh well, I set aside time for this. It doesn't matter. Don't put yourself in harm's way just to make somebody else comfortable.
Especially with younger and newer subjects, because in the erotic side, as I said, just because you're a subject doesn't mean you're submissive. I do also recognize a vast majority of subjects are going to lean and have submissive tendencies. It's
You're
part
not
of
a
that
doormat,
control.
damn it.
Exactly. We are, in our position, only allowed to take you as far as you let us go. So don't be afraid to say no, or to let don't feel like you're letting anybody down, because it's on both parties' responsibility to make sure that the other person is properly
okay.
situated.
So, Dolly has ridiculously strong feelings about that right now.
So, I know there are plenty of people who are going to have been in situations like you've been in, where you're young, you don't necessarily know or understand everything about it, and somebody takes advantage of that. So nobody worth working with is going to force or push you past what your established comfort is. Those are very big warning signs. Asking for your triggers, telling you to do things their way and not, thank you, sweetie, and not respecting what you are looking for. One of the things that I cannot stand that I've seen from people is laying out their expectations and saying this is it, all or none. Not saying that's not okay.
It's not compromise.
Especially if you're an established person saying, hey, this is the kind of person that I work with exclusively. That's different from saying, yeah, I'll work with you. And then once that's started,
this is what I expect you to be.
Everything needs to be agreed on. Consent, as well as anything else. Hey, Lydia. Welcome to the end of our little call, sweetie.
Lydia!
One last thing to cover that we can definitely do as far as safety goes is covering consent. Lydia, I will mention we are live on this, so please keep things clean.
Until the end, anyway, and then it devolves into chaos and madness.
Until we end the broadcast part. But as far as consent goes, one thing that I will throw out there to all hypnotists, as far as one of the things that you need to do, I'll put it this way: as a hypnotist, you need to protect your brand and your image at the same time. You need to make sure that you aren't doing anything that could be taken as suspicious or fishy, or it's going to look weird. You always have to be aware of your presentation of yourself. And that comes down to certain things with that consent as well, for the safety of your subjects and for yourself. One of the things that I will say as far as safety goes, unless it's been discussed before somebody has gone into a trance, it is off the table. Once somebody has gone into a trance, and I think a vast majority of us will agree on this, that once a subject has entered into a trance, regardless of whether they've been brought out, they can be considered impaired for a good chunk of time after.
It's like,
I typically, as a general rule, for myself with people I work with, regardless of how quick they come out of it, is once I've established a trance with that person, no new things are to be introduced until the following day. I give them an entire evening and night to cool off on stuff. Everything that I want to do, I may say, hey, I would like to talk about this tomorrow, but I'm not going to introduce anything new. Everything that you do needs to be established beforehand.
It's like in a court of law, you can't, if someone is drunk or someone is high, they are not legally able to give consent. It's the same thing.
And as a subject and a hypnotist, it's very important that you remember that and you keep that in mind, especially because what we do isn't universally recognized or acknowledged. It is or accepted. It is definitely a way out there thing for a lot of people.
But it is also an altered state of mind, like those other two things. Very literally.
But yeah, you're impaired. It's an altered mental state, and you need to be aware, because it is really, really hard if you're in a situation as a subject to have to go to somebody and say, hey, somebody hypnotized me and took advantage of me.
Most times police will laugh at you.
Which is it's not meant out of offense or anything like that, but it's something that, since it's not recognized or anything like that, it's something you have to be very, very, very aware of. And you need to make sure that both parties are always being kept safe. So consent, 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 consent. And communication. Consent, communication. I feel like I need to come up with some sort of jingle for this. Please don't let me come up with a jingle for that.
You are not allowed
Don't
to come up
sing,
with a jingle for it.
Jace.
Please don't sing.
So, did anybody
Do
else?
it.
No, Shelby. No.
No.
I'll make her, when we talk around, I'll make her think that she heard me sing. It's okay.
Okay.
So thank you for everybody who watched live, the one viewer, because this is an ungodly hour of the night. The next one should be at a much more reasonable time so that more people can actually enjoy it, because right now I'm not in a situation where I can do these any earlier. I'd like to think that we covered everything. Please feel free, if you're watching this, to add a comment or to message any of us. Let us know if you have extra things to add.
Tumblrs in the, when you post the video, can you post everybody's Tumblr in the description?
Yeah.
And also, a plug right now, I'm listlessly wondering. You can find me on Tumblr, or you can message me on Hangouts at readcritically@gmail.com.
So if anybody else wants to...
Sierra's is My Internal Needs at tumblr.com. Dolly's is braindeaddolly at tumblr.com. Don't remember what Lydia's is.
I'm Hypno Junkie.
Yeah,
I have a little blog.
Just a little one, right?
Itty bitty.
Just a
little baby one.
I do a couple things.
Really in comparison with the glory of mine.
I know Lydia just rebranded hers, so I will tag
Thunder, why do you not follow Dolly?
Because I have not gotten around to it.
So again, thank you for anybody who watches this once it's been posted. Thank you for our one viewer for this particular lesson. And thank you to all of you for hopping on here. Hopefully we covered everything. I want to, more than anything, put out as many resources as I can to make all of this seem way more accessible for folks that are interested in it, and also to make sure that the resources are there so that everybody stays safe. There's nobody, I don't want anybody to get hurt. I don't think anybody else really wants anybody to be harmed with their exploration and doing all this.
No, it harms the community more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. And there is enough bad press out there in our community, as is. We don't need more of it. So thank you again, everybody. And next time, honestly, I don't know what we'll cover next time. I'll post it when we.
It will be a surprise.
Yes, a surprise class. So thank you and goodbye to everybody who watched.
So long.
Bye.